Talking Tuesday is here on the podcast daily, but it's just a hypothetical version.
Oh, okay.
Is that going to be all right?
Welcome to the land of make-believe.
Make-believe land. Yeah. That's Bill Landis. I'm Austin Ward. There is no Ryan Day press conference on this Tuesday. But what if there was?
I hope not. Well, not planning on
it'd be cool if there was. I would love to be able to talk about the things that we were harping on throughout the first week of, that's probably the right word, harping, obsessing, dissecting, coming out of week one, but we won't get a chance to talk to him again until next Tuesday, I believe. So that'll be another one. That'll be the real version of Talking Tuesday, and we're always talking on the podcast daily anyway.
Certainly are.
But I'm just curious if there are new questions that have rattled around into your brain that only Ryan Day can answer for us.
Yeah, there are some. I thought it was interesting that, I guess this would have been before. We talked to Emeka on Monday, right, before spring practice started. He said he anticipates moving around a little bit this spring. And I guess at the risk of falling into the same trap I fell into last spring with Marvin Harrison Jr., practicing in the slot for all of the spring, I'm curious about what exactly that means. Like, is that just help Emeka out because he wants to be able to show NFL teams that he can play anywhere in the formation, which I would just assume about him. I don't know that I necessarily need to see film on that to believe it, but
sure.
Or if there's an idea actually moving Emeka around the formation some this season, and then if you do that, then what are the corresponding moves to that, right? As obviously that could impact what we project for Jeremiah Smith in terms of snap counts on the outside. It can impact what we think Brandon Ennis' role might be in this offense. So I think maybe, and that's a more specific thing, but maybe it's more generally just sort of early on, obviously, how Ryan Day is viewing the receiver situation, because you have Emeka back as a guy who's definitely going to start. You have Carnell Tate back as a guy who certainly seemed to carve out a starting role for himself last year. And then you have a lot of really exciting players behind them, but not a whole lot of experience. Even a guy like Jaden Ballard's been around for a long time. He hasn't played a ton. So what are the goals, and what are the thoughts on how that position could really shake out this year? Because prior to this year, and understandably so, I think we just sort of taken receiver for granted. They're going to be good. It doesn't really matter what they do. And I still think they're going to be good this year, but this is about as interesting as it's been this time of year in terms of potential moving parts at that position.
Yeah, I don't even just getting them back out there to watch for two practices. You look at wide receiver, it doesn't feel like there's a tremendous amount of flexibility or versatility because there's not an overwhelming amount of depth. They did have some departures there, obviously, to the NFL draft with Marvin, transfer portal, not just with Julian Fleming, but some of the younger players leaving the program. You look at it, it's you have incredible athleticism, and Emeka can play any position. And Brandon Ennis gives you the ability to be a rushing threat, work in the slot, and okay, that opens up a world of possibility. But I'm not really sure that it does if, yes, you're going to get Carnell Tate. He's going to play outside, and he's potentially going to be able to do a lot of Marvin-like things. That's the expectation. That's what we've been seeing and hearing and even hearing Marvin talk about since last spring. If you get Jaden Ballard to take that next step as an all-around wide receiving threat, maybe that does open up the chessboard a little bit for Emeka. We'll see how that transpires over the next 13 practices when Ohio State gets back out to it. But then some of that is banking on Jeremiah Smith tapping into that potential right away. And then if you get to that point, okay, maybe you see that, but you're still only talking about a group of 4, maybe 5.
Yeah.
And so it's not I don't have this sense that they can just do whatever they want with Emeka. And now we did see for day one, it's okay, well, here's Carnell Tate and Jaden Ballard on the outside, and Emeka can work in the slot. And I feel like Emeka's, in my mind, maybe I'll be proven wrong, happens a lot, Emeka's going to wind up playing more on the outside so that Brandon Ennis can play the slot. Maybe that's where the flexibility and the versatility will come from, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's hard to project, I guess. And without knowing who might make a move, right? Because it's not they're not hurting for bodies. Although I think they have 8 scholarship receivers, I think, this spring, which maybe is on the lower end of what they've had typically. But in terms of roster, what they want as a chunk of the roster, I think they're okay. I think maybe they're one short of where they usually are. But there's not a whole lot of known there, right? It's I don't know, what if Keon Graves goes nuts this spring, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like or Kojo Antwi. Mylan Graham's not here yet, right? I think like Mylan Graham will be somebody who makes this interesting once he shows up in the summer. So it's hard to sit here right now and say like, oh yeah, they're like they'll definitely be able to embrace the versatility and move all these guys around because we just don't know. Even like Carnell Tate, like he played a significant amount last year, but significant is only like 200 snaps, and like they didn't move him around a ton either. Like does he have some versatility? There's a lot to get at with that position this spring, and it's not. I don't like mention it as a way to like sound alarm bells off about it because I think whatever they settle on, whoever ends up being in the 4 or 5 or maybe 6-man kind of rotation, they'll be very good. But there's not a whole lot of sure things or fewer sure things, I guess, than we're accustomed to seeing with Ohio State at the start of spring practice.
Yeah, which is where we are, and we're talking about the situation currently, which is. Like as we've said on every show for the last week, 2 practices without pads. So I think by April 13th, the situation could probably and will look a lot different. And as you alluded to, Bill, in August it'll look a lot different because you will have another potentially versatile piece there in Mylan Graham that you can work into the rotation, and you'll have a better idea of what Jaden Ballard's looking like at this point in his career, and if that leap is actually going to happen for him, which it. It feels like we've been having this conversation about him for years, and in some ways we have. But it's you can see some of the physical development and filling out, and that's what Ohio State's been waiting for. But it's always you always see him do freaky things in practice in spring. That's not new. He's also been doing that for several years. But putting on the pads and being able to block and run all the routes and do that against a defense, that is not an Ohio State one and is in a season and a real game. That's another matter entirely. But that to me is sort of like where it all pivots around. Because if he does do those things that we've been expecting and hoping and waiting for, well, then you get to do a lot of creative things with Emeka and Brandon Ennis. And maybe it's unfair of me to put all of that on him, but I think he's one of the most interesting dominoes of any position on the roster right now.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. Like any time he's going into his 4th year, right? And anytime there's a guy who's been around that long, who's just like, who's kind of felt like he's been right there. I think I said this last week. Who's kind of felt like he's been right there, but hasn't really been able to break through. And like, I'm not trying to undersell how difficult that is in a room that is as stacked with talent as Ohio State's receiver room is, but that's the truth of the situation. He hasn't really been able to break through just yet. If it were ever going to happen, it feels like it would be starting this spring, and that does open up some doors, and it just expands the arsenal too. Like I don't think that happens like at the expense of Jeremiah Smith or Carnell Tate or really anybody else. I think it just gives you more to work with, which would be tremendous for Ohio State's offense. But yeah, it does. Jaden Ballard, who's playing starter reps, does kind of change like the makeup of how I would envision the offense, I guess, without that, right? It is pivot point is probably a good way to put it. Like a lot kind of shifts around whether or not he's able to do that.
Yeah, wide receivers just really did not come up that much during week 1 with either for Ryan Day questions or, with Chip Kelly, because so many other things to get into. Jeremiah Smith was mentioned, and he can run really fast and he'd be dangerous on go routes, but it's all these other things. I think like that was the extent of the conversation. So there's going to be more of that, I think, next week.
Yeah, I think there will be too. The one thing that did catch my ear on Thursday was Denzel Burke saying that he thought the receivers had a better day than the defensive backs on the first day of spring practice, which is like we all know how good Ohio State's defensive backs are and how deep and talented that room is, even if there's some youth there. And then the next time on Thursday, Denzel said he thought the secondary had the better day, and I think you want that back and forth. But that the receivers on day one impressed Denzel Burke to that point, and we know he's not a guy who's going to BS anybody. That should make you feel pretty good, I guess, about not that there was any reason to not feel good about the receivers, but it's like while they're working through all this stuff, it's like, oh yeah, they're still pretty good.
Do you think if you gave Denzel Burke truth serum, he would start lying?
Yeah, like that to revert the reverse effect. Yeah. Maybe. There's too much truth in him now.
I don't know.
He has to lie.
I don't know how that works. Like, that's his default state. So if something had to change, I think you'd just start lying. Be like, no. Everything is awesome. Don't worry about it.
I don't need to see more from anyone.
Totally good. Yeah. All right. So that's a deep talking Tuesday version of wide receivers. What else would you want to find out?
Yeah, I wanted to mention receivers before I got to offensive line.
Oh, okay.
So, I want to know. I think like I have what I said this on the Rooster Show. I think I said it last week. Like I have wrapped my mind around the idea of like, okay, you really want to see what Luke Montgomery looks like at guard, so then Josh Fryer is going to stay at tackle. But then is like Josh Fryer just like working through the spring like any normal returning starter would, or are there other guys, Tegra and Zen Mahalski, I guess would be the two that you're going to throw out there as well to see like, hey, maybe this looks a little better. Like, is there? What's the situation with the competition on the right side of the offensive line now? And I don't think they've anointed Luke Montgomery a starter by any means, but I kind of feel like he's going to
Seems like they want him to.
Yeah, I think they would really like him to be their starting guard, and he has to earn that in the remaining 13 practices. But if that's the case, and Josh Fryer is a guard or a tackle, excuse me, then it was like all the conversation we had about what's happening on the right side of the offensive line, like for no reason at all for like the last 3 months, because that's fine. A lot of the stuff we talk about in the offseason ends up not being all that important, but it's just not what I was expecting. And I certainly don't think it's what Ohio State fans are expecting based off the reaction to seeing Josh Fryer at tackle on the first day of practice anyway. So I think we need like a reset on how Ryan Day is viewing the right side of the offensive line.
I think he definitely gave us one.
Yeah.
Which was also in response to his own comments in February, where it's like, yeah, we're going to consider Josh Fryer a guard. Well,
we've considered it.
Did you finish up that conclusion before you even got to a spring practice? Like, which could be the case. I certainly thought going into last week that we were going to see Josh Fryer practicing a guard early on. Mm-hmm. And we talked in those offseason conversations about why Ohio State did not go into the transfer portal for a tackle. And well, because they feel maybe the option is there with what they have with Zen Mahalski, Luke Montgomery, and Tegra Shabola. And we never mentioned the first team All Big Ten coaches pick at tackle. And no. I'm not trying to suggest that there's more cachet for those awards. I know how they're voted on, and they don't always mean a whole lot. And I've mentioned in a couple shows, like looking back at Josh Fryer's PFF numbers, which we can take that for the same amount of salt grains as you do all Big Ten team. But certainly Ohio State could justifiably say, we do still think that the answer's here because the starting right tackle is still here.
Yeah, I don't think I've certainly questioned some all Big Ten selections over the years, and it is an inexact science. But it's pretty rare that you get put on one of those teams and you stink.
This is the coaches one. It wasn't the media one.
You might think there's a guy or two who is more deserving, but I don't know that anyone gets there who's like outright bad. I guess like maybe Sean Wade did not have a tremendous season, I guess, the year that he got it. But that was more of a tip of the cap to how he played the year before. Mm-hmm. And that happens. But that wasn't the case with Josh Fryer because he didn't have any tape really from the year before. So there was some baseline level of play there that teams that went up against Ohio State respected enough to put him in that position. It doesn't mean that he was a perfect right tackle. Clearly he wasn't, and his play dipped toward the end of the year. But I think there are things that he did well, especially in the run game. And like I said before, like I'm okay with the general philosophy of allowing guys a little bit of runway to prove that they've gotten better. Especially this time of year. Like maybe you want some more clarity in the middle of August, certainly. But when you have these 15 practices and you really think Luke Montgomery is the best at guard and that's the best thing for your offensive line, like let Josh Fryer go out there and show you that he can be an improved version of what he was last year. And then if he can't, then you mix it up and try to find the answer, whether that's Tegra or Zen or something comes available in the transfer portal. But I don't know that Ohio State's necessarily doing itself a disservice by seeing if Josh Fryer made some gains in the offseason.
We'll probably show up in 8 days next week, next Tuesday, because today's Tuesday, and he'll be at guard.
At guard, yeah. He'll be playing like tight end, and
we'll have spent all this time like looking at it and trying to figure out why they came to the conclusion they did, which may well be the most obvious conclusion to keep Josh Fryer at right tackle.
Yeah. Well, when do we get the full on the 30th? Right, not till.
Yeah, we're hoping, we have fingers crossed that maybe. The media availability schedule will change, and there will be an open window next week. But currently, there's not. So this is the longest layoff, as currently constructed, that I can ever remember for Ohio State to not have any even the stretching period. So hopefully, Ryan Day and Jerry Emig can make that change for next week when everybody gets back from spring break, but we don't know that. Either way, we'll still hear from him.
Yeah, we can still ask questions about it. But I was just saying it's going to be – I think it's going to be really hard to get any kind of handle on what's happening until we get to watch the 2 full practices we're going to get to watch later on in spring, which is fine. I feel like I've evolved. I don't need answers at the very beginning of spring.
Okay.
I used to feel like I needed them on the first day of spring, and now it's okay. It gives us time to speculate wildly about things.
I think we're starting to view it a little bit the same way. That's dangerous. Like the journey for this team, I'm excited for the year 2024 because there's so many fascinating pieces, and that's personnel, that's coaching staff, that's the whole package. And they don't have to name any starters on the first week of spring practice.
Yeah.
Like quarterback, right tackle, how you're going to play with the linebackers. I'm more willing to sit back and soak it all in than I have ever been before, which is exactly what you said. I'm not trying to steal your thunder on that, but I'm more in tuned with that this is going to be a fun ride to take than I have been in the past.
That's kind of where I am too. Like there are questions that need to be answered. Certainly, I'm not trying to say like, oh, I'll figure it out. It doesn't matter who the right tackle is. Like eventually, it's going to matter who the quarterback is, certainly. But like, yeah, can we like? I don't know. I just want to like enjoy watching it kind of play out and have fun with it because like, and it's not coming from the point of view of like it's Ohio State. They're going to be good no matter what. It's just like this team feels like it's kind of like gearing up for something that's pretty special. So like you don't want to miss like the early buildup of it by like hyper fixating on like who's playing right tackle today. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
I don't think that all of that should happen behind closed doors.
Yeah,
not at all.
No,
and you did this.
Sometimes you say things that you don't mean.
I'm gonna keep undermining your own argument, which in years past I also may have agreed with, but because I've covered teams a long time ago. I don't know if anybody really does it this way anymore. Where like every single practice was open in its entirety when I started covering Wyoming, and I was like, I don't need that.
It's like NFL training camp.
Like I'm out of here. Yeah. I'm skipping that day.
You cover practices like they're games.
And then it was like that was scaled back a little bit at Tennessee. It's like, okay, you're watching the first 4 periods or 5 periods like multiple times a week. That's pretty much the sweet spot. But even then I was like, I don't know. I used to watch every practice. Like, what happened here? And now I cover Ohio State.
Yeah.
Which is not that.
It's not that. It's compared to a lot of other places, it's still pretty good. But yeah, we could. Now that the first week has gone by and we did not get to watch a full practice.
Okay.
I apologize for saying what I said.
So listen up, Jerry.
Yeah.
Bill has changed his mind. He would like to watch a full practice.
Please
he
and
wants
thank you.
the full thing. Tuesday or Thursday. It's your choice. But
I'm not picky.
The people need it because Ohio State fans need to go on this ride with us. That's why
right.
we're there.
Right.
We are taking the ticket. We're going on the ride, and then we're telling everybody about it.
Yeah. We're just having fun.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
I mean, it's a game.
It is a game after all.
Okay. Well, I don't. Nobody likes hearing us talk about how we do this job. But is there any other question that you really left week one? Like I needed an answer, and I didn't get one.
No, I think those were the two. I'm wondering about like opportunities for some of the running backs. Like I'm assuming that Travion Henderson and Quinshad Judkins aren't going to do a whole lot this spring, but maybe I'm wrong about that because of the offenses. Like, is there enough changing with the offense that maybe those two guys, despite being veteran, might do a little more than they would do in a typical spring as veteran players? And then if that's the case, then how does that affect like everyone behind it? Because Ryan Day keeps like mentioning Dallin Hayden's name, sort of unprompted. So I'm wondering when the live scrimmaging happens anyway. Like, of course, everyone's going through individual drills, but when they have the pads on, which will be soon, and they start hitting for real and have live scrimmage periods in practice, what does it look like at running back? Because I typically spring is like an awesome time for like true freshman early enrolled running backs to get a ton of work because they'll just throw you out there and let you get banged around a little bit. But the urgency of the situation, like of the coming season, the newness of Quinshad Judkins, and then like the arrival of Chip Kelly, I'm wondering if that might, kind of conspire to make this a different looking spring for Travion and Quinshad.
I wonder if there's another element that could be at play, which is, you and Berm were talking about Jim Knowles wanting to give the offense good looks and get good work. If the offense is trying to, return the favor, letting the starters play is the best way to get Sonny Styles and CJ Hicks the reps that they need to get better. And that's not a knock on the rest of the depth chart. And they're we saw those freshman running backs moving around. They look pretty good. They could certainly do that for Ohio State. But if you want Sonny to get up to speed as quickly as possible at linebacker, matching up with Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson is the best look you could possibly give them.
Yeah, and it's always a balance. I think this time of year, and I'm trying to remember last spring, Marvin Harrison would take, I guess to say Marvin, who Marvin is. He would be part of the live scrimmages, but they wouldn't tackle on those Marvin Harrison Jr., not senior. He would practice, but they wouldn't hit. He'd get 2 drives, and then he'd be done practicing for the day. And I don't know if that probably should be the way for Travion, just given his durability issues in the past. But I don't know. Maybe Quinshon Judkins gets a lot more work this spring than I initially anticipated.
Yeah, again, that's the balance. He doesn't need it. I mean, he's a 600 touch guy already in SEC football, so you want him to be healthy and fresh. You want both of those guys to be healthy and fresh, but you also are trying to get better through 15 practices. And if you're talking about the brotherhood nature of iron sharpening iron, I also feel like those guys will want to be out there competing. Maybe not to the level of every single rep, and maybe the Marv workload will be fine for them. Who knows? We'll see. But there are finite opportunities in March and April to get better, and you don't get to put the pads back on in May, June, and July. So if these guys want to better themselves for the NFL, they want to better their team so they can win a national championship, and maybe we'll see it differently. I don't know.
It'll be interesting. It makes me nervous. I don't want you to put your guys out there and play real football this spring. But,
all right, so we'll hypothetically ask Ryan Day that later on today. How much football do these guys actually need to play? How much do you want them to play? And then we'll fairy tale land the answer, and we won't get it until a week's time. And we'll do this all over again, but we'll probably have talked ourselves into 5 new questions to ask Ohio State once they get back off of spring break. Maybe it'll even be after an open practice. Who knows?
Is Pro Day next week? Pro Day is next week, right?
So there's a full week of opportunities inside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, no matter what. But we'd like to see the current players, not the former ones, if at all possible. And then we'll have something new to talk about on Talkin' Tuesday on the podcast today. He's Bill Landis. I'm Austin Ward. We will see you later.